Welcome back to Reddit Tales by Uncle Sammy. I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribed and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now cue the tension, cue the truth, let's get into it. Before this story starts, notice one thing. When somebody works too hard to control when you show up, who you meet, or what parts of their life stay separate, that is not always independence. Sometimes it is stage management. In this story, the biggest warning sign is not what I saw at the party. It is how many small moments I had already explained away before I ever opened that door. I walked into the party and froze, so hard my hand locked around the bakery box I was carrying. I had brought a peach cobbler from a late-night spot on Fawn Dulac Avenue because my wife, Nia, loved peach cobbler warm, with the syrup still loose at the edges. It was February in Milwaukee, the kind of cold that made your ears ache before you got from the curb to the porch. I was underdressed in a navy hoodie and work boots, smelling faintly like printer toner from the copy shop where I spent most of the evening fixing a jammed wide-format machine. The house belonged to a man from Nia's hospital unit, though I did not know that yet. All I knew was that she had texted me at 7 saying, "Girls' night. I'll be home late. Eat without me." By 10:30, my mother called to say she had seen Nia's car parked near a place she did not recognize while leaving Bible study. My mother was not the spying type, and she did not sound suspicious. She sounded confused. I told myself I was only driving around because the roads were bad and because maybe Nia needed her inhaler, which she had left on our bathroom sink. Music spilled out when someone opened the front door for a smoker on the porch. Old school R&B, low enough to feel deliberate. I stepped in behind two women in wool coats, nobody stopping me because parties run on assumption. The first thing I noticed was warmth. The second was the smell of air-fried wings, perfume, and candle wax. The third was my wife in the dining room, not with women from some quiet girls' night, but in a fitted cream sweater dress with gold hoops I had bought her for our 4th anniversary. Her hand was resting on another man's wrist like it belonged there. I do not know if shock is a sound, but if it does, it is a sudden vacuum inside your own head. Nia looked up, and all the color seemed to leave her face at once. The man beside her was tall, clean-shaven, wearing burgundy, close enough to her that any stranger would have called them a pair. He moved his hand off the small of her back too late. I saw the motion. He saw me seeing it. Nia's lips parted around my name, but the music cut across it, and the room carried on with somebody laughing near the kitchen island like my life had not just split open. If that moment hit you in the chest, pause right here and tell me this. Would you have confronted him in that room or walked out like he did, like this video? Share it with someone who loves real relationship stories. And subscribe for more stories like this that go deeper than the betrayal. I could have crossed the room. I could have demanded his name. I could have thrown the cobbler, let the glass dish break against the hardwood, and given everybody a story they would retell badly for years. Instead, I set the box on the side table next to a bowl of chips, turned around, and walked back out into the cold. That was the first decision I made that night. I chose not to perform my humiliation for strangers. People talk about pride like it is vanity. Sometimes pride is the only clean shirt left after you've been dragged through mud. My phone started vibrating before I reached the sidewalk. Nia called once, then twice, then 6 times in a row. I did not answer. Snow from an earlier storm had hardened along the curb in gray ridges. My windshield was covered with salt, and I scraped one patch clear with an old CVS Rewards card because I could not find the scraper. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the car between the seats. I sat there breathing through my nose, staring at the porch light, waiting for her to come running out. She did not. That hurt almost as much as what I had seen. I drove south with no plan, past shuttered storefronts in a corner carryout where 2 men in orange knit caps argued under the awning. Milwaukee after midnight can feel small in a way that makes pain louder. I ended up at a 24-hour diner near the bus line, one with chrome stools, watery coffee, and a waitress who called everybody baby without meaning anything by it. I ordered grits and turkey sausage because ordering food made me look less broken. I did not touch either. I watched the snowplow push slush into parking spaces and wonder when exactly my marriage had stopped being a place I could stand in safely. Nia finally texted at 12:41 a.m., "Please answer me." Then, "It's not what you think." Then, "Malik, please." Seeing my name on her screen felt offensive. I put the phone face down, then turned it back over, because I hated not knowing what might come next. There is a particular kind of self-betrayal in waiting for the person who hurt you to explain your own wound back to you. Around 1:30, I called my cousin Terrell instead of going home. Terrell drove city buses, knew every shortcut in the county, and had a gift for speaking only when words were worth the breath they cost. He buzzed me into his building on the north side wearing flannel pajama pants and a Hampton House barbecue t-shirt. So older lettering had cracked into islands. He took one look at my face and moved a pile of folded uniforms off the couch without asking a question. That was one of the things I loved about Terrell. He never confused curiosity with care. He went to the kitchen, came back with ginger ale, saltines, and a faded throw blanket his daughter hated because it shed blue lint. I sat down, still in my boots, and told him. I walked into a party. He nodded once and said, "Start where your chest got tight." So I did. I told him about my mother's call, the inhaler on the sink, the cream sweater dress, the man in burgundy, the way Nia looked more afraid of being caught than sorry for what she was doing. Terrell listened with his elbows on his knees. The TV muted in front of us, showing some overnight infomercial for knives, slicing tomatoes paper thin. When I finished, he asked one question. "Did you see enough?" I hated him for asking it and loved him for asking it, because that was the real danger waiting for me now, letting myself soften the picture until I could survive it. I said, "Yes," but I did not say it strongly. He heard that. Then tomorrow, he said, "You deal with facts, not the version of facts that helps you keep your routine." I lay down on his couch and stared at the ceiling fan wobbling above me. Sleep came in pieces, thin and useless. Around 4, I remembered Nia clipping coupons at our kitchen table, even though we both had stable incomes, because, she said, "Waste offends me." Around 5, I remember how she lined up her nursing shoes by the door, toes facing out, always ready to leave. Around 6, I realized readiness had not only been about work. The knocking started a little after 7. Hard, quick, desperate. Terrell was already awake because bus drivers keep ungodly hours even on days off. He looked through the peephole and turned back toward me with his mouth set in a line. "She's here." I sat up, suddenly exhausted in my bones. I could have told him not to open the door. That was the second decision. I made that could have gone differently. But I said, "Let her in the hallway, not inside." I needed to see her standing in daylight, stripped of music and mood lighting, and all the shelter nighttime gives bad choices. Nia was wearing gray sweatpants, my old Marquette sweatshirt, and no makeup. Her braids were pulled into a hurried bun, edges not laid, eyes swollen from crying or lack of sleep, or both. The sight of her in my clothes ignited something ugly in me. She stepped toward me, then stopped when she saw I would not meet her halfway. "Malik," she said, voice cracking, "I have been driving around looking for you." The sentence came out like proof of devotion, as though effort after the fact should count the same as loyalty before it. She reached for my hand. I put both of mine in my pockets. "Why were you there?" she asked, and that question almost made me laugh because only somebody cornered by truth tries to put the first burden on the witness. I said, "You told me girls' night." She looked down. "It was supposed to be. Then people added people. Did they add that man to your back, too?" I asked. Her face tightened. She whispered, "It looked bad." That sentence did more damage than a confession would have. People say, "It looked bad," when they are still bargaining with optics, still hoping reality can be reduced to a camera angle. Terrell leaned against the apartment wall behind me and said nothing. Nia started crying harder. But even through my anger, I noticed she was controlling the volume of it. That was Nia all over. Even her collapse had technique. "His name is Drayton," she said. "He works in imaging. We have been talking." It got inappropriate. Last night was the first time it crossed a line in person. The phrase "in person" landed like a drop pan. So there was already another line before that. I said, She closed her eyes. Messages. Calls. I asked. A pause. Sometimes. I remember thinking betrayal was less like a gunshot and more like somebody taking your house apart brick by brick while insisting it was still standing. I asked her one question that mattered more than the others. If I had not come, what exactly was your plan for the rest of that night? She pressed her lips together so tightly they lost color. Then she said, I do not know. That was a lie, and we both knew it. Adults do not end up alone at private parties in fitted clothes with people they have been cultivating through calls and messages and still get to claim confusion. You do know, I said. You just do not want to hear yourself say out loud. She started shaking her head, but slowly, like even her body was unconvinced by her. Terrell cleared his throat then. Nia, go home, he said, not unkindly. Let him breathe before you turn this into something he has to manage for you. She looked at him with naked resentment because he had named what she was doing. Nia had a way of needing care so visibly that people forgot to ask who was doing the carrying. Malik, she said again, softer now, please come home so we can talk in private. But private is where she had built the whole mess. Private is where she had hidden calls by taking them in the laundry room while water ran. I told her, no, I'll come for my things later. She flinched at my things. Possession sounds different when the marriage is leaving the sentence. You are really going to do this over one awful night? She asked. That sentence told me more truth than her tears had. She still thought the central event here was my reaction, not her conduct. No, I said, I am doing this over a long line of smaller nights that must have led up to this one. She sat down right there in the hallway on the carpet runner, one hand over her mouth. I did not help her up. Some pain should not be interrupted before it has finished introducing itself. I left Terrell's place around 9:30 with a grocery tote full of spare boxes and a headache tucked behind my left eye. The drive back to our duplex in Wauwatosa felt unreal, the snowbanks too bright under morning sun. We had rented the upper unit of a brick two-family with creaky steps and a retired mailman downstairs who salted the walk before dawn as if the whole block were his porch. I parked behind Nia's Honda and sat for a moment staring at our kitchen window. The little jade plant on the sill was visible from the alley. I had bought it because she said we killed everything green. Inside, the place looked unbearably normal. The dish towel with lemons printed on it hung from the oven handle. A church flyer for the youth coat drive was held to the fridge by a magnet shaped like a fish. Our wedding photo from Chicago, the one at Promontory Point where wine ruined everybody's hair, still stood on the entry table. Nia was in the kitchen wearing slippers now, both hands around a mug she was not drinking from. She looked up like she wanted to read my face the way nurses read monitors. I made coffee, she said. Do not take care of me right now. I replied. She set the mug down carefully, like sudden movement might break whatever last thread connected us. Can I tell you the whole thing? She asked. I considered saying no. There is dignity in refusing details that only reopen the cut. But practical life has paperwork, leases, bank accounts, and families. Clean endings require information. You get 10 minutes. I said, no rewriting, no blaming me for choices you made alone. She nodded immediately, too immediately, as if rules comforted her. Nia always loved guidelines, hospital protocols, laminated checklists, the illusion that every emergency came a chart telling you how not to bleed. Her story came out in pieces. Drayton started as jokes in the hallway at the hospital, then coffee on breaks, then text during overnight shifts when she said she felt like a machine moving meds from one room to another. She said I had been distant since I took on a second commercial account at the copy shop and started freelance layout work at home. That part was true. My hours were ugly. We had been trying to save for a down payment, and I told myself exhaustion was temporary. She said he asked questions about her day in a tone that made her feel seen. I hated how ordinary that sounded. Did you sleep with him? I asked, because adults can die from vagueness just as surely as from truth. She stared at the countertop and said, not before last night. I noticed the way she built the answer around time instead of action. And last night, she started crying again. We kissed. We were in a bedroom. You walked in before. She stopped there, hoping implication would protect her. I did not press further, because my body already knew enough to recoil. There are facts you do not need in full color. How long? I asked instead. Since October, she said. It was March. October. 5 months of lying while we passed each other cereal boxes and folded fitted sheets, and sat in pews with my aunt on second Sundays. October meant she had looked me in the eye on Thanksgiving at my sister's house while passing candied yams, and still carried another man in her phone. October meant my birthday dinner in December, when she surprised me with Bucks tickets and sang off-key in the car, which had happened in the middle of an affair. Suddenly the memory lost its confidence. Every sweet thing acquired a shadow behind it. I understood then why betrayal makes people obsessive. Your past becomes a crime scene with no tape around it. I packed in stages because rage makes simple tasks feel like algebra. Socks first, then work shirts, then the small fireproof box with our documents. I took my laptop, camera, passport, and the denim jacket my father had given me before he died. Nia followed me from room to room, trying not to crowd me, and doing it anyway. In the bedroom, she said, I was going to tell you. I turned so fast the hangers clacked against the closet rod. When? I asked, after you bought a house? After Easter dinner? After I accidentally met him in public? She cried quietly and said nothing. Silence answered better than speech. In our bathroom, her vanilla hair grease sat beside my electric clippers. The sight nearly undid me. Marriage is not just vows. It is adjacency. 2 toothbrushes aging together in a cup. 2 prescriptions at the pharmacy under the same last name. The towel she always claimed from the rack, even though we owned 6 identical ones. I stood there longer than I needed to, looking at a life built from repetitions. Then I made another choice. I left my wedding band on the sink instead of throwing it at her or pocketing it for later confusion. I wanted one clean symbol to stay still where the truth had landed. Please do not leave like this, Nia said from the bedroom doorway. Like what? I asked, without any hope. I zipped the duffel hard enough to catch the lining. Hope for who? She opened her mouth and closed it. That had been a quiet imbalance in us for years. Nia often spoke of us when the real subject was her fear. She hated abandonment with almost theological force. Her father had started another family in Indiana when she was 13, and she had spent half her life trying to make departures mean something other than rejection, knowing that history did not make me responsible for what she built to outrun it. I moved into Terrell's extra room that week, the one with a narrow bed and a framed poster of the old Milwaukee Road line he had found at a flea market. I told my manager at the print shop I was dealing with a family emergency and picked up more shift work, because labor is easier than feeling. The shop sat near an industrial strip where semis groaned at dawn, and the smell of ink got into your clothes no matter how clean the ventilation was. For 10 hours a day, I trimmed brochures, checked proofs, and aligned vinyl banners while my mind replayed the party in cruel, improved resolution. Nia texted every morning for a while. Did you eat? Can we please talk? I started therapy. I told my sister the truth. The most painful messages were the normal ones. The power bill is due Friday. The landlord called about the gutter. The domestic language persisting after the disaster felt obscene. I answered only when logistics required it. We moved like grieving business partners through the collapse of what used to be personal. One night, after a shift installing window graphics at a dental office, I almost replied to a longer message where she wrote, I miss your laugh in the kitchen. I set the phone down and went to wash solvent off my hands. Sundays were the hardest. We had attended New Hope Baptist in Brown Deer for 3 years, mostly because the pastor kept sermons practical and under 40 minutes. The first Sunday after I left, I skipped church and sat in Terrell's truck outside a barbershop while he got his shape up. Men came and went carrying the smell of talc, pomade, and hot clippers. A boy no older than 12 swept curls of hair into neat brown commas on the floor. Watching ordinary maintenance made me feel both steadier and lonelier. Life keeps asking to be tended even when yours has become unrecognizable. That might be mercy. It might also be an insult. About 2 weeks in, Nia asked to meet at a public place. Just for an honest conversation, she wrote. I chose a breakfast spot downtown, bright enough to discourage theater, busy enough to keep both of us civil. She arrived in scrubs under a camel coat, hair freshly done, wedding ring still on. I noticed that ring before I noticed anything else, and I hated that I noticed. She ordered tea and barely touched it. I ended things with him, she said immediately. I transferred floors. I told my supervisor we had a boundary issue. Everything about the sentence sounded sanitized, like hospital incident language. Do you want credit? I asked. She looked wounded. No, I want you to know I am not continuing to lie. I stirred my coffee, though I did not need to. You should have done that before there was something to end. The waitress dropped off our food with practiced cheer, unaware she was placing pancakes beside the remains of marriage. Nia kept talking. Therapy, shame, childhood wounds, feeling invisible. She was not wrong about her pain, but pain used as an explanation can start reaching above its station, trying to sit where accountability belongs. I listened because maturity sometimes looks like stillness, not because I was softening. Then she said the one thing I could not absorb. I think some part of me wanted to be stopped. I put down my fork. Stopped by who? She blinked. By reality. By consequences. By you noticing. I leaned back and looked at her for a long moment. You wanted me to do the moral labor for your temptation? Her eyes filled. That is not what I meant. That is exactly what you meant, I said. You wanted to drift and still be rescued from your own decisions. You were hoping I would arrive before you had to call yourself what you had become. She folded into herself after that. When the check came, I paid before she could reach for it. Old habits die with embarrassing dignity. Outside, the wind off the lake cut through my coat, and we stood near a bus shelter plaster with an ad for personal injury lawyers smiling too widely. Nia said, "So this is it?" I answered honestly. I do not know if this is it, but I know I cannot start rebuilding with someone who is still mostly interested in being understood. She covered her face with one hand. I am trying. Try without making me your audience, I said. Then I walked to my car and sat there until my hands stopped shaking. The divorce process started in April, which felt rude. Spring was arriving in little patches. Wet soil, gutter water, cautious crocuses, and I was filling out forms about dissolution and asset division. Because we did not have children, people kept saying that, at least, made things easier. I learned to hate the word easier. Easier than what? Easier than explaining to a son why his mother cries in the bathroom? Easier than choosing holidays? Maybe, but grief does not become simple just because fewer signatures are required. Nia moved in with her older sister on the south side. I kept the duplex until the lease ended, then found a small apartment closer to work. I had to tell my mother and sister the truth in one sitting, because black families can smell omission and chase it down with casseroles. We met at my mother's table on a Saturday afternoon while she was frying and complained about the price of cooking oil. When I told them, my sister Patrice set her fork down very carefully, the way people do when they do not trust their hands. My mother went quiet first, then practical. Are you safe? Is she pregnant? Did she move money? Only after triage did the sorrow come. It came heavy and offended, like rain in an outdoor funeral. Do not let church people turn this into your test of forgiveness, my sister said later while drying plates. Patrice had been divorced for different reasons and had learned the way communities can use God to rush pain out of the room. Forgiveness is not access, she added, pointing the dish towel at me like a judge. I carried that line for months. Forgiveness is not access. It helped me when Nia left a voicemail of me saying, I know I do not deserve you, but I'm asking for a chance to earn trust slowly. She wanted a process. I wanted a perimeter. Those are not the same thing, no matter how softly a person asks. Summer made everything smell more alive than I felt. Kids yelled under sprinklers. Men argued about the brewers outside corner stores. My new apartment had thin walls, humming pipes, and a tiny balcony that looked over a parking lot where somebody's alarm went off at least twice a week. I began walking after work instead of going straight home, sometimes down by the river, where kayaks drifted past breweries and office buildings pretending to be modern. Motion helped. So did the ritual. On Fridays, I got catfish from a place in Sherman Park and ate it in my car with extra hot sauce, windows down, letting grease and air do what they could. The first time I laughed for real again, I felt guilty. Taro had invited me to his daughter's 8th grade step show, and one of the boys lost a loafer mid-routine but never broke expression. The whole audience gasped, then roared. I laughed so suddenly my chest hurt. On the drive home, I realized grief sometimes acts territorial. It wants proof of loyalty in the form of your ongoing misery. Any pleasure can feel like betrayal of the injured self. I had been faithful to pain longer than pain had been faithful to me. That thought loosened something. Healing was not dramatic. It was mostly permission granted in private. In August, Nia called from an unknown number. I almost did not answer. Her voice was calmer than I expected. "I am not calling to ask for us back," she said. "I wanted to tell you the divorce papers are signed on my end, and I wanted to apologize without asking for anything after it." I stayed quiet. She went on. Therapy had uncovered habits of concealment she mistook for self-protection. She was learning that hunger for attention becomes dangerous when it stays unnamed. For the first time, she sounded like she was talking about herself rather than arranging language around my reaction. It was too late to save us. It was not too late for honesty. "Thank you for finally not handing me your feelings to carry," I said. She made a small sound I could not read. Then she said, "You were a good husband, Malik. Even when you were tired, you were kind. I treated your steadiness like furniture." That line stayed with me. Furniture. Useful, dependable, easy to stop seeing because it is always there. I told her, "You did not ruin my whole life, but you did ruin the life we had." She whispered, "I know." We ended the call with no soft promises, no vague future friendship, just the plain dignity of finished things. Sometimes closure is simply the absence of fresh damage. The title of this story, if you need one, sits in the middle. I walked into the party and froze. Then I walked out. My wife ran after me the next morning. People may hear that and think the dramatic moment was the freezing. It was not. Shock is automatic. Walking out was a choice. Refusing to convert my hurt into a public scene was a choice. Letting her speak in a hallway instead of my cousin's living room was a choice. Returning for my documents before anger could grow roots in the furniture was a choice. Survival, I learned, is often just disciplined decision-making in ugly weather. By fall, the leaves along my block turned the color of rusted copper, and I started taking a night class in digital illustration at the community college. Not because heartbreak transformed me into an artist overnight. I had always liked design, always arranged type on flyers at the print shop with more care than the job required. But marriage had consumed the extra edges of my life. The class met Tuesdays in a room that smelled faintly like dry erase markers and old carpet. My instructor wore tiny round glasses and kept saying, "Leave some negative space. Everything does not need to be filled." It felt like advice larger than composition. One evening after class, I stopped at a neighborhood diner in West Alice and saw Nia through the window of the pharmacy next door. She was waiting in line, coat belted, hair cut shorter now, reading something on her phone with that serious crease between her brows. She looked ordinary. That startled me most. Betrayal had turned her into a giant shape in my mind, but there she was under fluorescent lights, just a woman picking up medicine after work. She did not see me. I had a clean choice. I could walk in and interrupt the small neutrality I had fought for, or I could keep moving. I kept moving. That choice mattered because vengeance hides in strange costumes. It can dress itself as closure, honesty, even courage. But not every unspoken thing deserves a voice just because it is available. I went into the diner, ordered chili, and watched the waitress refill ketchup bottles with the concentration of a surgeon. The radio behind the counter played the Isley Brothers. A man near the register argued gently with his grandson about whether cornbread belonged sweet or plain. Life kept presenting itself in little complete scenes, asking nothing from my wound. I began to understand recovery less as forgetting and more as rejoining the world without making your hurt the main translator. The divorce finalized in November. I signed my part in a downtown office with gray carpet, weak coffee, and an artificial ficus in the corner, trying very hard to look alive. When I stepped back outside, the sky was low and silver, the kind that promises snow without committing to it. I did not feel triumphant. I did not collapse. I walked to my car, sat down, and rested both hands on the steering wheel, the same way I had the night of the party. Only this time the feeling was different. Not numbness, not rage, just room. A room where panic used to sit. A room where memory no longer ran the whole house. That evening, Terrell took me to a fish fry at a VFW hall, where the tartar sauce came in little paper cups, and everybody over 50 acted like the line should move according to seniority and prayer. A local quartet sang near the raffle table, and somebody's Annie in a purple church hat corrected the drummer twice without ever leaving her seat. I looked around at all that ordinary black American endurance, laughter with bad knees, flirting after funerals, joy cooked in aluminum pans, and felt suddenly anchored. My marriage had ended. My life had not. Those are not the same sentence, even when grief tries to write them as one. A few months later, I gave away the peach cobbler dish I had brought to the party. Not the memory of it, just the glass pan itself. My co-worker Denise needed one for a church bake sale, and I handed it over from the back shelf at the shop. For a second I almost kept it, superstitious about objects that survive bad nights. Then I let it go. We attached meaning to containers because the contents were too painful to hold directly. Denise thanked me and promised to return it clean. "Do not worry about it," I said, and for once I meant more than the dish. I still think about Nia sometimes, usually when winter starts and someone nearby smells like vanilla hair grease, or when I pass the hospital where she used to work and remember waiting in the parking lot with soup when she had the flu. Missing her does not confuse me anymore. Missing is not a verdict. Love does not turn false just because it ended badly. It becomes part of your evidence about who you were willing to be. I was loyal. I was hardworking. I was tired in ways that made me inattentive. None of that made her affair my fault. But all of it remains mine to learn from. So here's the truth as I carry it now. I walked into a party on a freezing night in Milwaukee with a peach cobbler in my hands and a marriage still intact in my mind. I walked out without shouting because I wanted at least one part of that moment to belong to me cleanly. My wife ran after me the next morning, but regret after exposure is not the same as honesty before harm. What saved me was not revenge, not closure, not even certainty. It was a series of plain decisions made while my heart was in pieces. That is how I left. That is how I stayed myself. If this story stayed with you, do not just move on quietly. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that regret is not the same as honesty, and subscribe for more powerful relationship stories like this one. And before you go, tell me in the comments which moment proved the marriage was already over for you. The detail I keep returning to is not the cream dress at the party. It is a sentence at breakfast. Some part of me wanted to be stopped. That is what unresolved characters can do. It tries to make somebody else responsible for the boundary you refuse to keep. And the healthier moment is not dramatic either. It is Malik leaving his ring on the sink, paying the check, and keeping walking past a pharmacy window. Quiet decisions build the life you get after betrayal. The end.